Um, as you all know, the world lost Supreme Court Justice and true icon for gender equality, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, last Friday night, Erev Rosh Hashanah. And we want to dedicate this week's Women on the Week news roundup to her life and legacy, and as always, talk about it from our unique lens as Jewish women. I'm Meredith Jacobs, CEO of Jewish Women International and former editor in chief of the Washington Jewish Week. With me, as always, is Jody Radoran, editor in chief of The Forward. And today I'm also joined by Josephine Dalston, reporter for JTA. But our special guest this week, and we are honored to have her, is Abbe Gluck, professor of law, founding faculty director of the Solomon Center for Health Law and Policy at Yale Law School, professor of internal medicine at Yale Medical School, and professor in the Institution for Social and Policy Studies at Yale. But most importantly, Abbe is a former clerk to Justice Ginsburg and is here to share her unique personal insights. So, Abbe, I just want to begin with you. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss, but can you share with us what it's been like these past few days?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Meredith. And the loss is really all of ours. And so it's personal to many of us, but it feels personal, I think, to so many people who didn't even know her, which I think is so remarkable. And so many people over the last few days have told me it feels personal to them. So they can't quite imagine what it feels like to those of us who were so privileged to know her. In terms of the last few days, I think most of it was on TV, but I'll tell you about some of the stuff that you might not have seen or might have been different. Um, you might have noticed that the law clerks were lined up in front of the court yesterday to receive her casket. That's a Supreme Court tradition. Normally, the law clerks line up in two straight lines. Because of COVID and because there are so many of us, they split us up in this sort of army of law clerks on the plaza, which in the end I think was socially distanced and safe, but also set a really striking visual image of her impact and the support. Let's not forget that so many people flew across the country in the pandemic, dropped everything to come and be there for her. And it's really moving. I mean, most of our California law clerks were on the plane right away. So it's really, people drove 8 hours from Michigan, really remarkable. After the casket went inside, there was a private ceremony, which I think parts of it were televised. We saw that live. The law clerk saw it from a special viewing area that they very nicely constructed for us because we all couldn't be in the Supreme Court together for the safety of the justices. Normally, we'd all be inside. Inside the court, interesting for Jewish tradition, there are some interesting traditions in the court. The courtroom gets draped and the justice's chair gets draped. I did check, the mirrors were not draped, but it would have been very cool if the mirrors were draped. Afterward, there's a tradition that does have some echoes of the Jewish tradition where many Supreme Court justices have a vigil where the body is guarded by a member of the Supreme Court Honor Guard and also the law clerks from the time of their arrival to the Supreme Court to the time of their departure. Justice Ginsburg has a very long vigil, both because of her popularity and because of the anticipated crowds in the time of COVID. And the law clerks have been standing by her side since she arrived to the court, straight through until tomorrow morning, Friday, when the family will take her to the Capitol. So we stood there through the night. I was there last night, midnight and 1:40. And then in addition, out in front of the building at 3 p.m. And then today I'll be out there for a variety of shifts and then again through the night tonight. Very moving and very special and did remind me a lot of the same kind of witnessing vigils that, we did for my mother and my grandmother when they passed.
What was it like? Can you tell us just a little bit more about what it was like when you were there at midnight sitting by her body?
Yeah, it's so beautiful. The court is so quiet. And, they brought the coffin inside because for safety. And so it was in the grand hall of the court. When you walk in, there's this beautiful marble alabaster hall lined with busts of the chief justices and these gorgeous flowers on the ceiling. It's really a remarkable room. Sculpted flowers. And it's there in the middle, it's draped in an American flag. And there's a member of the honor guard. And, you walk out there, we relieved our co-clerks who were there, and we stood next to the honor guard for 20 minutes of complete silence in the empty courthouse at midnight. And just a time to reflect. And I found myself thinking about so many things that happened over the years with the justice that it really was like those moments you get during Ginsburg services and all the times of reflection that we have in the Jewish tradition. It really felt that way to me.
I wanted to ask you about that. She wasn't the notorious RBG when you clerked for her, but I'm sure she loomed large. And we've been reading about in your beautiful piece that you wrote for the New York Times, in fact, about the personal interest she took, about the advice she would give her clerks. Is there anything you can share from memories of those days, of things that you've kind of carried with you that she taught you throughout your career and your life?
Sure. Well, I think two things in that, unpacking two things you just said. One about sort of her trajectory from not notorious to notorious, right? And so when I clerked for her, and I would say it's more like notorious, not notorious, notorious, because back in the 70s, she was notorious in her own way, in her own scholarly way. She was a good of gender law, right? And so she was a rock star and a controversial one in the 70s based on some of the positions that she took, but she really was a famous trailblazer. When she got on the bench, she was a pragmatist, an incrementalist, and collegial. So her voice was not as loud, maybe, as it was as an advocate. She got to the court, you have to remember, the way she was a junior justice and then the second most junior justice for more than a decade. That means you don't get the big opinions assigned to you and you don't get the big dissents. So it took a while before she started getting the attention that she deserved because she had the opportunity to speak more loudly through her opinions. She had a very big gender rights opinion in 1996, the Virginia Military Institute same sex education opinion. But then it really wasn't until the mid 2000s when she found herself suddenly, unexpectedly, the only female on the court that you started to see her say, I'm the only one here and I better speak up. And her voice got louder, her dissents got more strident. And yes, they were noticed in that 2013 Voting Rights Act case, Shelby County, where she earned the moniker Notorious RBG from that young woman who gave it to her. But it was happening before. So we could talk about that more if you want. But in terms of the clerkship experience, I will say that it's well known to anyone she outprepared everybody in the court. And that included the litigants, her fellow justices, and her law clerks. So she taught us how to work hard, how to make sure we got everything right, and to stand behind our work. She also lived this incredibly full life where she would work at the court until 8 p.m. and then go to an opera for 3 hours and then go back and work till 3 in the morning, right? So she filled her life with the things she loved. She loved work. She loved the arts. She loved her husband. She loved her family. Her life was full. And that meant, like many Jewish working mothers, she got very little sleep, right? But she didn't need it, right? And she taught us all. I mean, the other thing I'll say, you can ask me more questions. I don't want to be blabbing on, but her marriage, as a young woman working for her, to watch the model of a marriage that she had was profoundly inspirational. She and her husband, Marty, were truly equal partners in marriage and in life. They supported each other. She moved from Harvard Law School, where she was only one of 9 women, to Columbia for him. She supported him early in his career. He promoted her for the bench like no other, right? They were completely equal. She would have birthday parties for us in chambers, and he would bake the cake, right? And so it's just it was a great way to sort of begin your life as a married lawyer, working for someone who's that kind of role model.
I love that. Jody, I wanted to ask you about that because I think her marriage with her husband, as well as her friendship with Justice Scalia, I think are serving, especially now, as really modeling more than just her brilliant legal mind, but the way she lived her life. Can you speak a little bit to what you were observing? Oh, Jody, you're muted, actually.
Sorry, we have a lot going on here today. I really agree and found myself, I just think there are so many aspects of Justice Ginsburg that are serving as role models and inspirations for people, and that her impact, her legacy will be this multifaceted way. And for constitutional scholars and lawyers and activists and in the political field, the impact of first the really establishment of gender law as a field, and then so many of her dissents and her majority opinions will have their impact. But I really do think that for the layperson, the impact, it's funny that her marriage is such a model of the things she was fighting for in the law in the 70s, this like true equality and also, but not just equality, right? Also like passionate partnership and love. I mean, in both of the movies, the feature and the documentary, it just comes through. And I've been spending a lot of time, as I know many journalists and probably readers have been, going back through various interviews, and the way that she speaks about their relationship is just incredible. And yes, I do also think that this friendship with Scalia is one of the most important parts of the legacy. This is a thing that is all too rare today, and was, I think, getting rarer and rarer every year that she was on the court, of true respectful friendships across ideologies and partisanship. We were just talking about this at our editorial meeting this morning, because I guess Cardinal Dolan put something out about how the parallels he sees between Justice Ginsburg's inspiration from a kind of Jewish values, social justice framework, and how those Jewish values she was raised in and raised with and believes in informed her work. He was making a parallel between that and his own ways that his religion informs his politics and his beliefs. And someone in our editorial meeting was saying that he thinks that there's a misunderstanding there, that it's really very different. I don't think it is that different. And I think that we too often look for what divides us instead of what unites us. And like what united Scalia and Ginsburg was the seriousness with which they took the law, right? As well as their love for opera. So those are two big parts of it for me, the marriage and the friendship. And I don't want to go on and on either, but I do also think that lots has been written this week about the value of dissent, and that her real power was in writing dissents, particularly in the last few years. And I just think that is such an important lesson for our time. And again, from a Jewish perspective, I think one of the great values of Judaism is that value of debate and respect for the minority opinion. We see the way that we revere Shammai in our history, even though we don't use his rulings. The Talmud is all about majority and dissent, right? Debate. And I think we need to really celebrate dissent and respectful relationships with people we disagree with, now more than ever, as the country is so deeply divided over the very question of how and when to replace Justice Ginsburg. So I think she has quite a bit to teach us.
That's the perfect segue to Josephine. I know that you cover the intersection of gender and religion, and what are you hearing in your coverage, and even the response that I'm seeing on social media, whether it was, oh, she passed on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it means she's a tzaddik. Although I also heard one of my board members said the explanation she heard was that she was needed to assist God in his rulings as he filled out our fate in the book of life, which I personally love that. But also this idea of may her memory be a revolution. She didn't strike me as a revolutionary. She seemed very, when she said she kind of knit together the pieces, she was more strategic, and maybe that's a different type of revolutionary. But I'm wondering what you're hearing and what you're seeing kind of in that debate.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Meredith. Well, first of all, I just wanted to zoom out and think about what Justice Ginsburg meant for Jewish Americans and Jewish American women. Her life, in a lot of ways, was the story or the success story that American Jews wanted. She was the child and grandchild of immigrants who grew up in Brooklyn, suffered loss of her mother at a young age, and she was able to, get degrees from some of America's top universities, become a famous lawyer who later went on to join the top court in the country. So we're seeing someone who really embodied this idea of like coming from not that much and overcoming various obstacles, with regards to gender as well as anti-Semitism, to become so well respected. So I think in that way, she really resonated with Jewish Americans, and just for women in particular. I mean, as having like the first Jewish woman on the Supreme Court, that for a lot of Jewish women and female rabbis I've spoken to, that's really resonated, seeing yourself, seeing someone who shares your identity and who might share a similar life journey to you, being one of the country's top judges. So I would say that's something I've heard a lot, just about sort of, she was very remarkable, but also her story was relatable in many ways. And then with regards to her death, so right when we found out that she had passed away, people started tweeting, a lot of rabbis and prominent Jews started tweeting this idea that she died on Rosh Hashanah, and this was sort of made her tzaddik, made her a righteous person. And so I think that legend is not something that's sort of universally known. We have many sort of ideas like that in Judaism, and they're not all accepted by everyone. And it does stem from a passage in the Talmud, but it's not like an official law or something like that. But I think more than whether it's a tradition that everyone observed, I spoke with a few rabbis who said, how could you not read meaning into the fact that she died on one of the holiest days of the year? Someone who, by most members of the American Jewish community, was considered to be, you know, one of the most prominent and well-respected members of the community. And looking right now, and, you know, I want to add also something that was interesting was there was an obituary about her in The Guardian, and it said that she had abandoned her religion. And a lot of Jews responded really strongly to that. I think it was referring to the fact that she grew up attending an Orthodox synagogue where women couldn't do a lot of the things that men could do. But if she has abandoned her religion, that would mean most American Jews have, because most American Jews are not necessarily traditionally observant. But that doesn't mean that you've abandoned your religion. And I think her Judaism played a huge role in the work she did, even though she wasn't traditionally observant. So like, to tie it all together, I think there's this idea that she was like a righteous person, maybe not in the traditional sense of like a rabbi who issued a ton of rulings on Jewish law, but as someone who embodied the American Jewish identity and fought for her values. So that, and I think that ties in what you were asking about also, may her memory be for a revolution, which is this new saying that people are saying, rather than may her memory be for a blessing. I think just the idea that she broke all these barriers, and she was someone who wasn't scared to speak her mind and stand up for what she believed in. I think that really resonates for American Jews, especially at a time like this when most American Jews are Democrats and are not happy with the current administration, and trying to take from her legacy the idea that we can speak out and we have to stand up for what we believe is right.
Right, which leads you to the next, and she was proudly and strongly Jewish, speaking quite often about her religion, her traditions, her heritage, as well as speaking quite often for multiple Jewish groups. I'm sure we've all had the incredible opportunity to hear her live. But Abbe, we just got a question in the, you know, from the audience, speaking to, I don't know if you were there this morning when President Trump arrived, and so the question is just, are there any comments on the scene this morning when he was booed and greeted with a vote him out, and discussing the contrast, whether that's to what you know, her relationship with Scalia, or just anything. What was that like in that moment?
Well, I wasn't there this morning because there are two clerks on every 20 minutes. So I was not on the 10 o'clock shift. I am on the 5 o'clock shift today. So I was not there. We didn't know he was coming. I did not go to watch. I did hear that he was there for a very short time and he was booed. I think it was pretty uneventful. The Supreme Court does a pretty good job of keeping things in order. And I think it sounds like he was there for a few minutes and he left. I do think it does pose a stark contrast to the very accurate description that Jody gave of Justice Ginsburg's wonderful relationship with Justice Scalia, as sort of the rancor of the current time, as contrasted with just their relationship. I mean, I can't help but noting, so a lot has been said about Vice President Biden. His longstanding time in the Senate has given him a lot of cross aisle relationships. And so one question is whether those relationships have that strength, that bond, that should he get elected, we can move to some kind of better place. I don't know. But Biden's longevity in the Senate, very much like Justice Ginsburg's longevity, has, and from an earlier time when there was much more bipartisanship in the Senate, might be a path forward also, a different way, maybe not as significant or as striking, but I can't help but think of, as we think about earlier generations and working across the aisle.
Thank you. I think you're so right. And I also just wanted to call out, we're getting a lot of things in the chat just talking about how there was a Jewish female a woman rabbi, Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, who is phenomenal. I know her husband clerked for Justice Ginsburg. I know she worked with Ruth Bader Ginsburg on a Seder supplement that they wrote together.
They highlighted the women from the Seder story. They wrote like a little passage where they highlighted the women in the Seder story. But Lauren did a great job. She sang such a beautiful version of the Malach HaRachamim. So beautiful. Yeah, she did such a beautiful job. Her voice was so beautiful, and her words were so. The service was necessarily very short because of COVID distancing rules, I think, and so she packed so much in to that short time.
I think the justices' relationship, that story and how they worked on the Haggadah, and the fact that she had this great relationship with Rabbi Holtzblatt, and just various other stories. I feel like that's another part of the role modeling that actually doesn't get as much attention, but just her general accessibility. I mean, Meredith alluded to how many Jewish groups she'd spoken to. Not all Supreme Court justices do as much public speaking, and particularly as she became more and more of an icon. And I mean, we ran a piece over the weekend right after her death by Abbe R, who had interviewed her for a book many years ago, and then her book was being turned into a musical. And so Abbe had turned her interview with Ginsburg into a song, and she had mailed her the lyrics, and Justice Ginsburg edited the lyrics and gave her feedback about it. And I feel like I've heard all these different examples in the last week, this outpouring of direct access and engagement on a level that I think is quite rare for someone on the high court. And I guess she just had an enormous capacity, as Abbe has described, of just, being I don't know, she seems so real and connected to individuals and eager to kind of do all the work she was doing in her day job, and also engage in as a thought leader and public figure and role model and icon and all of this. I think it's quite rare these days to see someone engage at that level.
And I love the joy she seemed to get in later years about really the notorious RBG. I've seen things written where she would carry around the tote bags, and I love that she lived to see that, to see her work just resonate so strongly with not only all women and girls, but just everyone.
And by the way, we should not forget the planks, the workouts, that through her, that was another way where she's so committed to, doing these workouts. That is another role model.
I think she was. I think it's also more than that. I really do think that to see an 87-year-old woman committed to, benching, it's just a different way of seeing female strength. I think it's a commitment to her own health. But I think when you ask how it is that little girls can look at an 80-year-old woman and see an idol, to see a model of strength, I think that the workouts have something to do with it too. I mean, it's sort of the whole package of somebody who, and for women often, older women, don't get that perception of strength. And for Justice Ginsburg to have reached this pinnacle in her 80s, I think it's just another feather in her cap of how much she's done to advance the position of women. as sort of equal players in our society, even aging women. The strength that she showed, I think, was just remarkable.
I totally agree. And this Steve Berman in the audience just made this great point to us in the chat. He said he just realized that she might be the only justice whose voice that he would recognize. And I think that's probably true for a lot of us. And I remember so clearly the statistics about, most Americans can't name half of the justices on the Supreme Court. And back in the day, they used to confuse them with, they thought Judge Wapner was from the People's Court, was on the Supreme Court. Anyway, but I bet like the name recognition for Ruth Bader Ginsburg must be the highest of like any justice in years.
Well, I'll tell you, my daughter's in second grade, and her name happens to be Ruth, but not for Justice Ginsburg. A happy coincidence, because my mother's name is Ruth, but it's a happy coincidence. And when the justice died, my daughter got an outpouring of emails from other second girls, knowing how important the justice was and what a role model she was. So I think you're right, Jody, that there are these little girls who realize the Supreme Court justice died and are feeling it. Yesterday at the vigil, one of the things to me that was most striking, because I was standing by the casket looking out, so many little girls of different ethnicities were coming by dressed like Justice Ginsburg, their hair in a bun, with the judicial garments on, and they all were carrying different signs with some of her favorite quotes. So to see that, and there were a couple of really beautiful moments. There was one moment I was standing there with a father with two young girls, and he took his two little girls there, and they stood, and he like put his arms around them, and they had a moment of silence. There were a lot of parents coming with girls, with their daughters and with their sons.
Deborah Rosenblum from JWI just noted there's also the children's book, I Dissent, that I'm sure
it's a great one.
And I saw a picture of a little girl dressed as a superhero with a cape who was there, which must have been heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. But that vision of
the justice got a lot of, because of her notoriety among little girls, she started getting all of these things, like books about I Am Not a Princess, How Not to Be a Princess, like all of these sort of little girl books. And one thing that I feel very fortunate about is she used to put some of them aside because she got so many, right? And so sometimes when I would go visit her, she'd have a little goodie bag for my daughter of sort of How Not to Be a Princess books that I would bring home from her, because her office has these books of the things that people send her.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, like, off of what Abbe said about how she resonated and you saw like little girls of all different backgrounds there, I think that was part of sort of another reason why she especially resonated with the American Jewish community. Of course, like the Jewish community, we're always proud of every Jewish celebrity and every famous Jewish person, but to see someone like that also resonate so widely in American society and become a cultural icon, it's especially like a point of pride to then have her be someone who is not only Jewish, but spoke about being Jewish, had a biblical quote in her office. So I think that especially like sort of reinforced how she really became like an icon in entire American society, and how proud Jews were that she did become that.
Someone asked, why is it that the media isn't reporting enough on her role as a Jewish woman? Or someone said that she's the first Jewish person to lie in state. Is that true? But that it's talking about her being the first female, but also as the first Jew. I don't know, Jody, do you have any thoughts on that, or Abbe?
I sort of don't accept the premise of the question. I feel like it's gotten tons of, I feel like most, we do, I posted the story in the chat about The Guardian, which has also looks at how other media covered it and how kind of Jewish it was. The Washington Post had a story yesterday on Rabbi Holtzblatt and the service that was, very much surfacing the Judaism. And I think that the fact that I feel like that's gotten a lot of attention in the mainstream media. And like, I don't know, we've published, 30 pieces since she died or something. And we have a big look coming out tomorrow morning that I haven't read yet, but I'm really excited about, which really is sort of wrestling with putting her in context in terms of her public Judaism. Because I think that, I think you're really right, Meredith, that the frequency with which she spoke about her Judaism and the way in which she spoke about her Judaism was pretty significant and maybe getting rarer and rarer. And so Talia Zaks on my staff is doing a kind of deeper look at that. It's one of the questions I've been thinking about all week. And I think readers will be interested in that too. I guess I do feel like she is pretty, like, I was so surprised that somebody also criticized, I think NPR's first obit maybe didn't mention that she was Jewish. And I was really surprised by that because it seems to be such a big part of who she was. And again, I think Josephine mentioned this earlier, but the Judaism that she embodies is a very much a leading mainstream American liberal secular Judaism that is driven chiefly by social justice. I mean, she has always maintained relationships with the synagogue. I think she, we've published these stories, and so have others, about the way in which she pushed for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah to be days off when the court was going to be in session on that. The first Monday was, I think, on each of those days in the last 10 years. She had the mezuzah and the tzedek tzedek in her office. So there's many ways in which she was also, traditionally tied to kind of observance and our text. But I also think that, like, she was, for many, many Jews today are really define their Judaism around their kind of social justice framing of issues and their activism towards building a better world. And I think she was that kind of Jew, and is a leader of that kind of Judaism, which really is maybe the leading Judaism in America today.
Yeah. Do you have time for me to respond to the question in the chat about the Jewish objects in the office? Because I just saw that question.
Please, I was just going to turn to you, actually.
Okay, no, I can answer that question. And then the other thing I just say to Jody is, she had this line, I'm going to get it wrong because I'm not looking at it, but it's something like, she began almost every speech, I'm an American, a judge, born, raised, and proud of being a Jew, right? And so she would start her speeches to Jewish groups that way, sort of as an affirmation, like, I'm Judge, I'm American, and I'm Jew, and I'm proud of that, right? And then she would go on and talk about how those values shaped her. So in her office, very prominently was displayed the very famous phrase from Deuteronomy, I think, Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdaf, justice, justice shall you pursue, and the rest of the phrases, that you may thrive. And she used that a lot. She actually had it woven into one of her doily things that she wore around her neck at the court. She also, in chambers, there was a lot of Jewish paraphernalia. She actually has a mezuzah on the door of her chambers that she got from one of her law clerks, who's Orthodox law clerk, who went to the Shulamit School for Girls in Brooklyn, where my sister-in-law actually also went to school. And my sister-in-law did not give her that, but another Jewish law clerk gave her that. Actually, the clerk who gave her that was Rochelle Shoretz, who founded the organization Sharsheret, breast cancer organization for Orthodox Jewish women. So also a lot of connections there with her Jewish, lots of Jewish paraphernalia. She was, loved by Jewish groups and was very proud of displaying all of that.
And Abbe, I know the half hour always goes so quickly. So, before we wrap up, I just want to turn to you again to see if there's anything else you want to share from your experiences with her.
I just really want people to remember, because we are talking to this Jewish women's group now, that until 1971, the United States Constitution did not recognize sex discrimination under the Equal Protection Clause, right? So 1971. So that is only 50 years ago. And that was Justice Ginsburg's case, the first case in which the Supreme Court of the United States struck down a law for discriminating on the basis of gender. So there are so many things that we can talk about, all the pathways, and we're going to remember all of these things, but it's easy also to forget her enormous legal legacy and the one for equality. And I hope that of all the, amazing, notorious, and Jewish, and Marty, and loving things that we can remember about her, she would also want us to remember her for the very important work that she did for equality and social justice. And so I hope the little girls around America remember that about her too, and always know that she's their Thurgood Marshall, and that we have a lot of her work to continue.
Amen. I just have to close by sharing this. So about a year ago, somebody sent this through our office. It's a little creepy, but I jokingly told my staff that she was our version of the elf on the shelf. We were trying to think of a name, Ruth with the truth, and I would place it around the office and say that she was watching and making sure that every day we were fighting for justice and equality. And now I'd like to think that somehow she's watching over all of us. And I hope that we take with us the memory of her strength and her extraordinary life. And may it power us as we each in our own way continue her work. So I want to thank Abbe, Jody, Josephine for being here today. And I want to thank all of you for being on the call. And I want to wish all who observe an easy fast. Gamar Chatima Tova, and I hope to see you next week.
Thank you so much, Meredith.
Thank you.
Bye.